the things that we have learned last week, and also we'll be clearing some of the doubts that has been raised last week. And after that, we'll be going on to just introduce you to on the Azure DevOps platform. So uh, let me start by sharing my screen. So first of all, am I audible and is everything clear to everyone? Shane,
Yes,
can you?
Akhil.
Yeah, yes,
You're
yes.
good.
Okay, okay. Hope you all can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I'll just quickly go through what we were discussing last week. So Jira, we used it for project management and to collaborate between teams. So we had Sprint there, and we have created issues. We had backlogs, and we have checked the Jira features like roadmap backlogs, boards, reports, issues, and releases. And there is also something called Confluence, which comes in with Jira. That is what is meant by here, the project pages. So there you will be able to create your documentation starting from the BRD document to the API documentation or your project document. So everything goes from here. The project management is a fully featured project management tool that we have familiarized with. So we had these many issue types: story, task, bug, and epic. So epic comes on the top. On the Under epic we have the story. Under story we can have subtask, and also for epic we have task and bug. So each of these things will have the subtask category. So each of our epic, story, and story, these are divided into certain small pieces. That is called a subtask. Okay. So this is roadmap, backlog, to be taken any for sprint, and board contains the active items that is in the sprint. So it will be better if I show you the yeah. So this is how your board look like. A to-do list will be there, in progress will be there, done. So these columns you can modify. You can add a testing phase here. That is also possible. So everything this is possible. So these are the features that we have added. Then what else? Board we have reports, and we have familiarized with the reports of the Jira. We have the burn up chart and burn down charts. So it gives you an overview of how your project is going. Issues we have talked about. Then project pages. Yeah. So these are the features that we have familiarized in Jira. And when we come to Confluence, we have so many templates available here. So if you are going to start a project, we'll be starting with the product requirement. We'll be gathering the requirements, and the requirements will be changed into, maybe updated into stories. Uh, so that all we can do it on a one click from the document itself. So I believe you have gone through the last week's topic, so everything is covered out there in a descriptive manner. So let me answer some of the questions that was asked last week. So there was a question like, is there any single page where we can see all the work logs that is logged in by you for a certain period of time? So in Jira, we don't have such a feature, but maybe right now we don't have a feature for that in our subscription, or maybe in our maybe if you pay more, maybe they will provide. I don't know about that, but we have a tool like Jira Assistant. So I will ping you the tool and its link here. So with this tool, this is a Chrome extension, and also a Mozilla Firefox extension. So with this extension, it is possible to see all your workloads in a single page. So let me just give you the overview on that. There is a Jira Assistant here. we are going to the dashboard. So this Jira dashboard, I mean this Jira assistant is linked to my Jira, and you can see all the stories that I have in my task list. So these are my open tickets, and if I want to know my work logs, the logs I have done so far. So if you click on this calendar of work logs, I can see here in Monday I have logged 12 hours, and 24th I have logged 8 hours. Like that, you will get an overview of how much log time you have done in each week. So by clicking on this, you will be also able to edit the log time. So if you want this 3 hours to be changed to 4 hours, it is also possible. I'm not doing that now. Anyway, that is possible. And there is a workload report that is available. So here, if you can select the date range between 1st March to 30th. So these many works I have done. So this is also available here. Also, you can add your team to this. Maybe I'll add Yuri. So maybe, but I may not have access to Yuri's log time. Maybe my access is limited. So for that reason, I won't be able to see his log times. Okay, so if I have access, if you are a privileged user, then you may have access to this log time. So for me, only my log time is visible. Okay. So that was the one. That was one question that was raised last week. So you can go through this. There's a cool tool that you can refer. Then, yeah, another question was this one. Is it possible to categorize your project? I think this was raised by Sumit last week. So uh, it is possible. In the project settings, there is something called category. So for me, this was not showing, maybe because of my privilege. Still, I think I'm a developer in this Jira platform, so maybe that's why I'm not able to see this category. So I just sit with Yauri. So for Yauri, it was showing like this a project he can group under the category. So for me, this was not showing. So yeah, this is possible. So categorizing your projects is possible, provided you have the privilege for this. Yeah, these were the two questions that was asked last week. Mm, so before we move on to next session on Azure DevOps, do we have anything or do we need any clarity on any of the things that we have discussed in the last week or now? Is my presentation not visible?
It was visible, Akhil.
Okay, okay. I'll share once again. Uh,
Guys, any
so
question? Probably even if we don't have answers, we'll have such a sessions repeated. Um, we are planning to have this on every Friday, or at least in alternate Fridays. Let's connect once again, and we'll bring up with answers. Please raise your questions if you have anything around Jira or Confluence.
okay, so in that case, we can see. Okay, anyway, we can discuss this on a mail, or the platform is open anytime. So you can discuss with me, or you can send a mail. We'll add the questions and answers in the next session. That is also possible. And if you have anything right now, you can ask now, or we'll move on to the next topic. Okay, so we'll move on with Azure DevOps. I believe no one has anything to clarify as of now. So last week, what we have gone through is a project management tool. So first we need a project, then only we'll be able to manage it. So that's what we are covering in the in Azure DevOps. So this is where we start building our projects. So first, there are many the features that that is available in Azure DevOps will be uh, the first thing that we'll be using will be this Azure repos, then Azure pipelines. So these two things are the most common things that we'll be using in our daily basis. And there will be something like Azure artifacts also. Even Azure test plans and Azure boards we can use, but right now we are not using it. Anyway, we can check on that also. So Azure Boards is something that is similar to Jira platform. So maybe it is not advanced or it doesn't have advanced features like Jira. Jira is just for project management, but here this is comes as a full as a package. So some of the things may be missing here. I don't know because I haven't tried this. Uh, Anyway, this offers a feature for planning, tracking, and discussing your project and its stories across teams, just like Jira. So if you guys have some time, you can just go through these Azure boards. So the next thing that we'll be focusing more on will be Azure repos. So just like we have a GitLab repository now in our on-prem, uh, we have this this GitLab or Git repository in Azure as such. So that is what we call as Azure repositories. So it is a private repository, and you'll be able to commit your code, raise merge request, everything that you can do with Git, you can do here also. So basically, it's a Git only, but Azure calls it that Azure repositories. That's all. Only the name is different. Okay, so the direct integration with Azure pipelines is possible. So right now, for deploying our applications, what we are using is either we will go through Jenkins. So if for some older applications, what we were doing is we were just building the jar and putting it in the server and starting it manually. So technology changed, and what we were doing is we again went to Jenkins, where the deployment was done on a button click. So this jar will be created automatically, and this jar will be moved to your server, and it will be started as such. So that's what we were doing in Jenkins. And again, the technology grew up, and we were using GitLab runners. GitLab runners you have to install in your system, in your servers. Also in GitLab, you have to use GitLab so that you have to configure the CI pipeline in GitLab. So that will build your jar, and it will move to your, it will push to your Docker registry, and in the server, it will pull down from the Docker registry, and it will start it out there. So again, advanced features came, and we are going for Azure pipelines. Here, the main usage of this is we are using Azure repository, so it will be easy for you to link between Azure pipelines and Azure repositories. Even if you are using other GitLab or GitHub, it is also possible. But again, if you are moving into one platform, then it will be always easy, you know. So you will get everything under one umbrella. So that is great in terms of Azure. So that is about Azure pipelines. Then what we have is Azure artifacts. So we had something like Nexus. So people who are familiar with Java application development in our environment might be knowing about Nexus. So what we were using Nexus is for building our jars or common libraries and pushing into Nexus. And we'll be using those jars from the Nexus. We'll be referring to those jars in our Maven or Gradle file. So similarly, this Azure Artifacts also offers such feature, the similar feature or same feature as Nexus. So you will be able to build your jars and upload into Azure Artifacts. This all happens on the code and command line. So you run two-line command, then your jar will be created and it will be pushed to Azure Artifacts. That is possible. So it can be easily referred with in the Gradle or POM file that we are using to build our applications. So these are the 5 main features of Azure DevOps, and there are many other features also. So one another feature that I want to introduce you to is this dashboards. Okay, active dashboards. So this is a completely customizable dashboard that you can create. So this is my one pipeline. CI means okay. I need to talk more about CI and CD to, to give a full overview on what this graphs and all means. So just you can understand now that this is a build pipeline. So if your build is success, then it will show a green, and if it is failed, then it will show a red line. So in 4th March, I have done these many builds and these many failed and 2 are success. So that is what this graph means. Similarly, you can add more graphs and sheets to this dashboard. You can click on this edit button, and there are many widgets that are available. You can go through and play around with any of these widgets. You should be welcome means assign to me. So this is my assign to me widget that I have added. Build history. You can see the build history. Done editing. I'm just configuring my build history. Set the pipeline. And, so similarly, just like currency QACI, I added another one more build history here. So this shows me pretty much how much how many build was successful, and how many build was failed, how many builds were failed in a specific time. And this is for CI pipeline, and this is for CD pipeline. Don't worry about CI and CD. I will explain you about what is CI and CD. So that. So we'll come back to the slides. So in Azure DevOps, there are these are five, one, three, four, yeah, 4 or 5 roles or groups that are available. So the I will explain you what on all these groups are there. So these are the groups that we are defined in Azure. So the owner, they have the admin level access to all the resources. So they are the supreme authority. They decide who will be the architect, who will be the what all rights that you can provide to everyone. So there is an owner, there is an architect. So for building these repositories and all, you need to create a pipeline, or you need to decide on where these applications should be hosted and all. So that things only architect can decide. So those kind of roles or those kind of privileges is what architect means. So architect comes below the owner. So below architect, there comes the developer. His access is limited, and he will not be able to create pipeline. Obviously, he can create pipeline, but he'll not be able to select the cluster or the server onto which the application is to be deployed. He can run a pipeline. That is possible. So as you can see here, you'll not be able to choose a cluster or the service connection onto which this application is to be deployed or not. And the fourth one is the least privileged one, that is the stakeholders. So they will be only be able to see the dashboards I have shown you earlier. So they won't be able to see the source code, or they won't be able to see or edit the build pipelines or anything. Just they can see the dashboards and they can view the reports. So that is what I mean by stakeholders. So these are the 4 things that you can note down. So when we are trying to use Azure DevOps, it's going to be an alternative for these many things that we are using today. So GitLab will be replaced by Azure repositories. Jenkins and GitLab Runner will be replaced by Azure CI and CD, Nexus Azure Artifacts. Then Docker registry that we have today in public repo and also in our 11.22, I guess, if I'm right, it's in 11.22, I guess. No, 11.27. So that will be replaced by Azure Container Registry, or in short form, it's called ICR. And the EFK tools, that is the log management tools, that will be replaced by Azure monitoring tools. These all are optional. If you are using it, then we can eliminate the other alternative of that. Then we'll be using Postgres as a service. So that again will be hosted in Azure. So we are not taking any server or and starting a Postgres instance on Postgres engine on that server. Instead, we are taking Postgres as a service from Azure, and also the Kubernetes. It is also taken as a service. So repositories we have continuous integration, dashboards. Okay. So any doubts so far? Or any of the things that is discussed? So I'll just go through the things that I have discussed. So this is typically how a GitLab or Azure repository will look like. So this is similar to our GitLab, where you have all the project structures here, and you can change your branch. And also you can see the commits here. Merge request will become is shown as pull requests. Okay. And these are repositories, and this is pipelines. So these are the pipelines that we have created. And another important factor in this kind of continuous integration model is that we can specify triggers for this pipeline. That is, if you have built a pipeline, then you can mention that if a commit comes to my master branch, then I need to trigger this pipeline. So that you can do it here. So that is why this is called a continuous integration. So whenever there is a some rule that we are written, based on that rule, we'll be able to trigger this pipeline. And when this pipeline build happens, so this is just for building the image and building the jar and building the image and pushing it to the Docker registry. Here that Docker registry will be the easier. So okay, I have to open the wrong one. Excellent. So this is the Docker registry that we have mentioned. So we are pushing into this container registry, Azure container registry. Even it is possible to use a Docker Hub registry and other Docker registries that we have in on-prem, but you can always go for the Azure Container Registry that comes with the Azure platform. So I believe everyone knows about Docker registry and all. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. What is Docker registry and all? Okay. I'll give you an overview. I don't know if everyone knows about what is Docker registry. So everyone is familiar with Docker, right? So Docker is a containerized model. So earlier what we were doing is we were building jars and deploying it on the JVM. So if there are 5 or 6 applications, all these applications are deployed on the same JVM itself. So that makes managing these applications very difficult. So we have come up with containerizing these applications. So each application will have its own container that will be hosted in Docker. So how Docker works is Docker will create an image, and if you want to start this application on another machine or another server, if you have Docker installed there, you can use the same image to run this application there. So you can store this image in a public registry or uh, in a repo where this is accessible to everyone or accessible to all your servers. So that is called a Docker registry. See, so you can hide this developer and this Docker public registry part. So just consider this Docker private registry. So every environment, that is UAT, promotion, and the production, all these environment can pull the images from this Docker registry part. So we have replaced this Docker registry that we have now with ACR, that is Azure Container Registry. So we are ready. Okay, so this image that will be pushed into the Docker registry, and there are some YML files. So YML files and all I'll discuss later. So that will require much time. So in the release part, so this is continuous deployment, that is CD. First we have CI, continuous integration, that is for building the image and pushing into Docker registry. And the another one is continuous deployment, that is for deploying these images to the server that you have provided. So just now what I have created is action. So as you can see here, this is a continuous deployment for this pipeline, common reservoir action UAT CI pipeline, this CI pipeline that I have shown you earlier. So whenever a build happens here, this after that build is successful, this CD is automatically triggered. So this triggers, and whatever is given in this stages, it will be executed. So these are the commands that will be executed. I will walk you through what is kubectl and all. For that, we need to learn about Kubernetes and what is Kubernetes and why it is used. So anyway, you can see here the same. No, not here. This is the connection that we will be using to deploy into your uh, Kubernetes server. We have to talk about this namespace and all. Okay. Okay. So come back. We have pipelines, releases, and environments library. Okay. So in Azure, it is possible to define variables or variable groups. So at the time of deployment, you can use these variables in your pipeline, and you can execute based on your environment. So if it is a development environment, you will specify this development group. So that variables will be applied to the environment while building the image and while deploying also. So that is possible. And there is also an option for secure files here. So what is this Action IQ license is, we have purchased one enterprise license for Action server. So that license we have uploaded into this secure file storage. So if you open this, you will not be able to read anything from here. But you can use this license file onto your pipeline. You just have to refer to this file. So that's how we have deployed Action Enterprise onto our Kubernetes cluster. Library, task groups, artifacts. Okay. So this is what an alternative to Nexus that I have talked about. So this is Azure Artifacts. Here you can build and push all your jars or whatever dependencies that you are having. You can push it to here. So as you can see, there are some dependencies that are coming from the Maven Central. So that means you just put your this Azure Artifacts URL, or you point your Maven or Gradle repo to this Azure artifact and its corresponding URL. Then the Maven Central, the charge that is required from the Maven Central or any public repo, it will be pulled automatically. Just like Nexus, how Nexus is working, the same way it will work. So if you want, we can search for some of our. Okay, these overlay comments, Hazira comments, these all are our jar files that we have pushed into Azure Artifacts that we can refer in our project. So it maintains the version. So currently only one version is available. So if there are multiple versions, the multiple versions will be shown, and how many people are using it. That is also shown here. How many downloads that are done and users done. So everything is shown. Okay, having gone through this Azure boards, while clicking into these features, I understood this is something similar to Jira. So as we are going with that, maybe we will not be using this. Anyway, this has something similar to Jira itself. Okay, anyway, that's great. So any doubts so far?
Yeah, Akhil, this is Gene actually.
Jim.
In this pipeline, how do you configure our code review and our test automation for our vulnerability testing? If anything is high or critical, deployment should not happen.
Even that is possible. I have to check that because we haven't done it so far.
Akhil, you can take your two treasury writer pipeline where we have already added Qualys code scan.
Yeah, Qualys we can.
Yeah, we can add. We already added that, and we also have Sonar, but we are testing it. Can you show this Qualys? Yes.
This is writer dev, right, Shyam?
Yeah, I think I've added in writer. Yes.
Maybe in reader.
Yeah.
So reader dev. Not here. Only I have added. So who added this?
Midun.
Oh. Is it in UI?
Not in UI. It is in the backend only. Okay, you can continue. Probably I'll take it and I'll share with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
To answer the question, we can configure the code scan in terms of security as well as in the quality. So both Sonar and Qualys both can be configured in just couple of clicks. That's it.
Yeah, that testing also we need to automate it.
Yeah, test automation, there are two ways. One, it will be inside the repository itself, where we can define our JUnit test cases, which will be running with the pipeline while we are building the project. Or if we are using any external testing tools like JMeter. Okay, so with JMeter, we can again do performance and functional testing. If we want to do a functional testing, if the script is automated, that can be configured in the pipeline also. So right after building the project, hosting it, we can add the post deployment script for testing. What we have done here instead is there is a on-demand cluster, which is a JMeter cluster, which can be spinned up, which will does only the testing on the UAT and staging environment. We can also choose the environment on which we have to do this testing. So there is a on-demand. When I say on-demand, we are not having this cluster on every time. That is triggered whenever is required, like in the development phase when we are about to release, then that can be added as a process where we'll spin up this image, it will run a script across the services and it get back to the report. And based on the report, we can plan the further progress, and this cluster which was spinned up can be put down. So we'll be paying only whenever is required.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
So
Shyam, that was
we'll cover all these completely. We'll start a JMeter cluster and test it. So we'll cover in subsequent sessions. So we'll be having the session repeated for next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, Shyam, that was informative. So, yeah. So just now we have talked about scaling up and scaling down. So, Jean, I think that answered your question. Maybe it is not answered fully. We'll get back to you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So we'll have an overview of what is Kubernetes. So then only we can go on with the next sessions and all. So maybe I can give only an overview today. After that, we may not be having time after this. Okay. Anyway, why we need Kubernetes? So earlier, how we were deploying our application. So first, we need to learn or understand what was our traditional structure on how we containerized our applications and we are deploying it. So for this, I will just provide some. Okay. So we consider we have one application, like let's say it's my application one, and we need to make it into production. What currently we were doing is we have one server, which is called as 10.88, and we had another server, which is 10.89. So we had two servers. We were deploying an instance of application one here. Oops. And we will deploy another application into 89. So so if we want to upgrade or make an update on application, what we had is an fi. We had a pool here. So we'll disable one application in 88 and we'll enable only for 89. And likewise, we were deploying applications. So I should draw something from here. Something from here. So this is how we used to deploy our application in traditional model, like we were doing today. So the problem with this approach is first is the advantage. The advantage is it is possible to stop the application and deploy another application, and you can completely shut down this 88 and you can make your changes here, and you can again connect 88 and you can delete the connection to 89 and you can make upgrade on 89 and you can again start 89. So the advantages of this approach is you have two instances to maintain, and the problem with this approach is you have only two instances. So it's an irony. So actually, when we have more request or more load coming to our server, maybe these two instances it is not it may be not be able to perform as our expectation. So these instances need to scale up. What we can consider is we can create another server, just like this 10.88. We can create another server 10.89, 10.90, and we can go on so forever. So, but this approach uh, is not such scalable. As the number of containers increase, and as we go on looking into the cost factors, and also uh, it is not always advisable to do like this. So we have another thing called Kubernetes. So it is mainly for this container orchestration. So this will manage the auto scaling of the applications, it networking, uh, and we can deploy one application after giving load to 40%, 60% load to a few clusters, few applications, and reducing the load to other clusters. We can make it down. So all those things are possible. So the definition of Kubernetes is it's an open source container orchestration system for automating computer application deployment, scaling, and management. So this is what Kubernetes is meant for. And as I said, whenever there is a more workload coming to, so whenever there is a more workload that is coming to our servers, it is possible to upscale the deployments. So that we can do with one command, the command that I have shown on the screen. It is an auto scale command. So this command says is that when the CPU percentage is more than 50%, if the CPU utilization is more than 50%, I need one more instance to be spinned up. So this type of commands you can use in Kubernetes. So it will make your life easy. Yeah. This. So if we need to learn more about Kubernetes, we can always refer to the documentation. So I'll give you an overview. So we have a Kubernetes cluster, and we have many nodes that is available on the cluster. The nodes, we can consider it as machines where your applications will be deployed. So we have a node, 3 nodes here. And in Kubernetes cluster, we have something called a control plane. So this control plane is connected to our cloud provider API. So all the commands that we are running, that will first go to this control plane and will be executed on the nodes. So all the nodes will be controlled by this control plane. So, yeah, I'll give you this. I will give you this slide if you want to learn more about this control plane and its components and all. You can go through these components, or in the later sessions we can discuss more about that.
Also, we are going with managed Kubernetes, right?
Yes, sir. I mean, AKS, right?
Yeah.
Azure Kubernetes Service. Yeah. So that was coming in my next slide.
Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Okay. We have a container, pod, and cluster. So the containers that we are traditionally talking about is Docker. So these Docker containers, there are other containers also, that container runtimes also that is available, but we'll be focusing more on Docker only because all our containers are Docker instances. So we have maybe we'll take an example of container 1 and container 2, and we have another container 3 and container 4. So these represents this 1, 2, 3 that represent 4 different applications. We can consider like that. So maybe in this concept called pod can contain one or more containers. So this container 1 and container 2 can be deployed to one pod. And the same pod can be replicated at the time of auto scaling. So that will become the port 2 and the replica is 2. So these same container 1 and container 2 can run on this container, this port 2 also. And there is another port 3 that has another two applications, that is container 3 and container 4. So this can again be replicated into another replica that we can create, that is port 4. So the definition says like this: a container runs logically in a port, though it uses a container runtime. Here the container runtime is Docker. A group of pods or related or unrelated pods that can run on a cluster. A pod is a unit of replication on a cluster. Yeah. So what does that mean? Whenever you need to auto scale a pod, auto scale an instance of some application or something, it is the pod that is replicated. So this group of pods, even if it is related or unrelated, that can come under a Kubernetes cluster. So this is an overview of how your cluster will look like. Container, pod, and cluster. So when we talk about pod, cluster and all, we need some interface or some mechanism to communicate with this pod or the container inside it. So if there are 4 different replicas of one container available, how you can communicate with this container, because there are 4 copies. If you're requesting some data from one application, uh, how you can which one how Kubernetes will hit that particular application and will give you the response. So this is possible through deployment and services. So it's possible through services. So deployment comes as a part of it. Anyway, so we can say that Kubernetes pods are mortal. That means this pod can be deleted or it can die anytime. So once a pod dies, it is the responsibility of the Kubernetes cluster to spin up a new pod and give it to you. So that is made possible through deployments. So there is a deployment engine. Maybe you can consider this as a deployment engine. I don't know the correct word for that, but you can consider this as a deployment engine that will contain all your deployments. So once the pod dies, it will make sure that another pod is recreated. That is this deployment. And there is something called a service. You can again consider this as a service engine. So there are services which will connect you to the outside world from these pods. So for pod 1 and pod 2, you can have one service that will connect you to the outside world. So the IP address, so this is what meant by this point. So the IP address of the ports with its replicas keeps on changing. Why? Because the ports can go down and come up again later. So in that case, the IP address will change. So in order to access these ports from outside world or from another port, we bring in the concept of services. We connect a service through deployment, which in turn will connect us to the port. So that's how the service and the deployment will work. So this is the diagram of how deployment and services are connected. No, how deployment and ports and how services and ports are connected. Deployment and services are not connected. So deployment keeps the ports running and services makes ports accessible to the outside world. Here the port is there and ports will have the containers. So again, there is a reference link for this. You can refer to it and can learn more. So this Kubernetes, it is an open source framework or open source container orchestration tool. So, but the problem with open source is that, no, I'm not talking about the problem with open source, but here, if you are to maintain a Kubernetes on our on-prem server, this will how you will be do it. You will buy a server and you will host or you will start the Kubernetes engine on your server. So this will, you can always do that, but it is not manageable at sometimes. Maybe you don't have adequate resources or you don't have much knowledge about on Kubernetes platform, then you may not be able to do that. So for now, for our starting stage, it is always better to go with a cloud-centric platform. So we have tied up with Azure, and Azure is giving us the Azure Kubernetes service. So we don't have to make such efforts to manage the Kubernetes Kubernetes platform on our servers. So Azure will provide us with the Kubernetes as service. So we just have to use that, and we can configure the nodes, the clusters, everything in the Azure Kubernetes platform. So it will make our life even more easier. And also they will ensure that the service is up 99.9% of time. So we don't have to worry about the service availability also.
Akhil, I have a doubt.
Yeah, sir.
Using this AKS, can we support even on-premises containers?
I don't know about that, sir, to be frank, but I think it is not possible because AKS, it's giving us it as a service, right? So maybe only Azure will be able to host that. Maybe we can host our Kubernetes as open source. We can host it in our server, but maybe AKS is not possible. Am I correct, Shyam?
No, I think, sir, for the cluster, for the VM, we will create a connection. So by that connection only, this Kubernetes will deploy the containers. So if we have access to our on-premise server and the Kubernetes deployed available in that server, the kubectl admin is there, then we need to establish a connection for that on-premise server, and we can try. We don't try this, but it is possible from
So in that case, Parandaman, AKS cluster will be only in Azure, right? The AKS cluster, we cannot deploy an AKS cluster on.
No, the cluster, the AKS cluster will always be on Azure. Then probably we have to see how that, like Parandaman mentioned, no, it is about the accessibility to the on-premise. So the connectivity is key, and maybe policy also, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
I think we should do an R&D on this. I don't know the answer, but actually, if you are able to work, then I think we can build some cool solutions around it. Because that will be one way where we can quickly bring in some existing YOM services into this AKS. Red current, YOM, this can be easily brought in. Think about it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Said that we have something called namespaces in Kubernetes. So as we said, we have Redcurrent, Yo2, Yom, everything in everything coming into picture. So we will require namespaces. So namespaces is a logical partition of your cluster. So we don't have to manage which all pods will be running on which all nodes or servers. So if you see here, there are 3 different nodes available in this Kubernetes cluster. This is for an example, but we don't know which pod or onto I mean which node is currently assigned for running our pod. So it is completely up to the Kubernetes cluster to choose a particular node that is available, and the resources that is being calculated for your particular application. Based on that resources, it will choose a node and it will start running on that application. So these nodes will be a physical machine, and the namespaces will be a logical partition of these nodes. So we have a kube system namespace here. For example, it is given like kube system namespace, here engineering namespace. So we can consider this as a YOM namespace, Yo2 namespace, or Redcurrent namespace, something like that. But these nodes will be sharing for all this cluster but it will be partitioned inside the AKS cluster itself. So we don't have to worry about the partition and security and all. Everything will be taken care by Kubernetes. But where to start and all, that will be defined by the Kubernetes itself. Only thing is that we have to separate these with the namespaces. So one namespace will not be able to communicate with another namespace unless specified. So Kubernetes also says pods deployments are logically grouped into namespaces. The groupings provide a way to logically divide AKS cluster and restrict access to create, view, manage resources. You can create namespaces to separate business groups, for example, with assign namespace. Yeah. So even you can do this also. Only admin users can access this Kube system namespace. Only engineering users can access this engineering namespace, and your two recurrent users, they can access only their namespace. Even that is possible. But the AKS cluster, that will remain the same. Okay. Said that, I think I have come to the end of my slide for today. So anything else? So I think I have gone through the just an introduction about DevOps, Azure DevOps tool, and the Kubernetes platform, so that in the later sessions we can learn more about Kubernetes, how to deploy applications into Kubernetes cluster, how to maintain pods, and how to create service and deployment YAMLs, how to set up CI/CD pipelines. So these all will be covered in the next sessions. Yeah. So any questions as of now?
Akhil, thank you so much for the session. I think no one has any questions. Guys, if anyone has any questions on Jira, anything, you can raise here. Okay, Akhil, thank you. No, we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for participating.